Hello all, welcome to the iGamingFuture Roundtable. iGaming affiliates, building the American dream. I'm Curtis Roach from the iGamingFuture team, and I'll be your host for today. It's an absolute honor to be joined by such a distinguished panel who'll be joining us for today's conversation, where we'll be looking into the future of the US iGaming market and taking a closer look at the challenges, but more importantly, the opportunities that are available for affiliates and operators alike in this burgeoning market. Now, before we get into the conversation, I'd just like to give my group an opportunity to introduce themselves, give a little bit of background to their connection to this topic, and then we'll get straight in. Thank you, guys. Over to you.
Thanks, Curtis. My name is Justin Stempeck. I'm currently the Chief Strategy Officer at Compliable. We are a gaming technology company that is building a gaming licensing platform to make gaming licensing easy for vendors and employees in the gaming space in the US. Prior to that, I was the Director of Licensing for DraftKings and in charge of getting licensing for the operations of the company across all the verticals within the company, as well as employees and vendors. And I got my start in gaming as a gaming regulatory attorney for just under 5 years in the state of Massachusetts here in the US.
Perfect. And then we'll go over to the other Justin Tonna.
Thanks very much, Curtis. So my name's Justin Tonna. I'm currently the COO of KaFe Rocks. I've been in the gaming affiliate industry for almost 15 years. During that time, I've had the fortune to work on some of the larger brands in the industry, such as Casino.org and Vegas Slots Online.
And Benjamin.
Thank you, Curtis. My name is Benjamin Truman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Media Troopers, which is a US-based marketing agency. I've been in the industry since 2006. And Media Troopers is one of the fastest growing US affiliates. So pleasure to be here.
I've been with the company for almost 2 years. Prior to this role, I led growth marketing for William Hill in the US. And prior to that, I led performance marketing for a few different subsidiary agencies under the Publicis umbrella. Obviously, been in with the betting landscape in the start in the US. So this is a very intriguing topic for me and something that I really hold dear.
Thank you so much for joining us. Right, okay. So what we'll do, we haven't got much time today, so we'll just get straight into the conversation. So I think the first question I'd like to kind of get you guys' thoughts on is, this betting market is still very new. How does this affect the sort of content being used to engage customers? Does it need to be more educational? Who would like to take this one first? Any of you guys have any thoughts on that?
I'm happy to kick off on that one.
Perfect.
I don't think it needs to be more educational. It certainly needs to focus on the specific needs of that market. But people in the US have been gambling for a long, long time. I don't think they need any particular education on how a slot machine works or how a blackjack table works. Online gaming may be new to some of the demographics that are used to more land-based options.
Right.
But I think it's more, or at least content more focused around what choices do they have and where do they spend their entertainment budgets.
Okay.
I would jump in here and say that the biggest difference in content is the sports that they're being covered. You know, while in the UK and Europe, it's European football. In America, it's American football and vice versa, you know. There's not much horse racing in America, while horse racing is very large in the UK. So the content is different based upon that. Justin's right. You don't need to teach an American how to play roulette or blackjack. Most people know how to play roulette or blackjack or know how to play dice. There's nothing to really educate there.
Yeah, and I would just add on to that I think as far as education, I mean, you're going to have a generational divide as well. I mean, any young person who grew up with the internet and had an interest in sports betting surely was able to figure that out on their own, even well before PASPA was overturned in the US. So getting them on board is not going to be a difficult proposition, whereas perhaps some older folks who are not as used to the sort of explosion of online growth in the sports betting and legal casino market in the US, that might be a little bit more. But honestly, I think what Ben was saying is accurate. I mean, people in the US have been gambling for a long time. It just used to be gated by state. So now the gates have been opened quite a bit since then.
Where you want to go back to what Ben said, where you want to educate people is where you will have a large number of casual bettors who come in on a particular sporting event. Say the Super Bowl is on and everybody's caught up in the hype. They want to place a bet. They might not know how to place a bet or what the odds mean. That's where your educational content will come in useful.
Okay.
Right. And just one more point of that I think is just kind of a funny anecdote is that, I mean, even something like ADW, which advanced deposit wagering, which has been legal in many states in the US for a long time, folks just didn't even know it existed. So when talk about education, I mean, there was people in Massachusetts I recall asking about how could they bet on the Kentucky Derby. And I had to explain that, online wagering is legal when it comes to horse racing in Massachusetts through an ADW provider. And they didn't even know that because there had just been poor education. So They were losing out a market right there.
Yeah. So I think the content does need to be more educational, but I think people are focusing on sort of the wrong education, right? People in the US already kind of understand betting in other forms, right? They gamble on the stock market, they gamble with insurance coverage and things like that. So it has to be adapting the material for things they already understand, right? That's going to be more of a notion I'll talk later on the product side, but as they educate, they need to kind of explain like, first of all, the ways to bet. It's not just a quick, rich sort of notion. Ways to feel confident in doing it, starting small, talking more about sort of payment and structure and things like that, and how bankroll management is really key, and things you're confident about and you know about and do research about, versus ways that it makes you more exciting and it's adrenaline focused. That needs to be the shift in the mindset to get the novices to play.
Interesting. Okay, so then looking more at the more technical side and the kind of revenue side, how does the cost of acquisition compare to Europe? Do you think this will change in the future as the market begins to mature? I'd like to start with you first, Ben, if you don't mind.
It's much different than Europe. In Europe, you have a much more mature market. Your cost per acquisition is much lower. In the US, the maturity of the market is definitely not even close to being there, 5-10 years away in most states that are legal. So your cost of acquisition is much higher at the moment. As soon as people become more mature, understand more of the market, your costs will go down significantly, but it's much, much higher than the UK. That is for sure.
Right. But you do expect it to level out at some point in the future?
Yeah, 5 to 10 years is a comfortable range to give it. It will take a long time. Some people don't even know that they can legally gamble in states where it's legal.
Right. Understood. Do any of you guys have any other thoughts on that at all?
I think as well in the US market, I always like to say we're in the entertainment business. People are spending their entertainment budgets on playing these games, playing slots, playing blackjack, playing roulette. If they're trying to recreate the casino experience, sometimes they just want to play the games for free. The entertainment budget's finished for this month. Can we play the games for free? And we see a lot more of that in the US market, that wanting to play the games for free. And as well, that comes with what Ben has said about it still needing to mature, where people don't even know they could play it for real money in some cases. They're just, the casinos that offer them still all new. They're used to looking for free games or maybe playing them socially. There's still a hill to climb there.
Okay, interesting. And then my next question is actually a bit of a kind of a two-part question, actually, because we've been talking about America, and many people kind of would agree, and I'm sure maybe you guys would too, that actually all the different states are kind of like countries of their own. They all each have their own frameworks and regulations, and I just wonder, how do trends differ from state to state? I mean, are there any clear differences, and also how does that how is that impacted by the regulation that goes along with it? So if we could just start from the consumer trends side of it, and then we can move on to the regulatory part, that would be great. I mean, does anyone have any thoughts in terms of, you know, the state to state differences?
Yeah. So, what's interesting is a lot of it also is dependent on, I would say, from a legislation perspective, how states grant market access, and I'll explain why, right? The way it started out is you have two types of states. Now it's expanding even more, but you basically have two types. States that allow for digital to be live immediately, other states that start with physical locations and then lead into digital. The states that start with physical, you're really going to, the strategy there is really to go after the lowest funnel user immediately. Because if someone's willing to travel to a physical location and place a sports bet, they're probably a heavy user, they're more adept, they're not going to be a novice player, right? Yeah. So it's starting actually from a more, let's just say, less educational play and a far more sophisticated method. You could talk more about parlays, teasers, more of the lingo, and then it's more wayfinding advertising to get the person the physical, get them in your database, and then transfer them over to digital once that goes live. The opposite is the case to get the digital users in, right? I think there you have to educate people more on why it's okay to put your social sensitive information into an app, why we might ask for other information, kind of walking them through that flow a bit better. And then you also might want to do that in tandem with other physical activations, using street teams at bars, sporting venues, and things like that, to get novices in those areas comfortable with the digital notion of it while working on the more expert better. So that's probably the difference in the marketing strategy and the user acquisition strategy based on the difference of how a state goes live.
I mean, I think the state to state differences are as different as the states themselves. I mean, you will see wild differences that are informed by the makeup of a state, and trying to understand it, particularly, I think, as an outsider to the U.S. is very difficult because there's all sorts of different factors in play. I mean, you have states that have brick and mortar casino interests that are pushing things politically one way or another, pushing the development of regulations one way or another, pushing a tax rate one way or another. You have tribal interests in many states, which have a heavy political weight attached to those as well, which will influence how online sports betting, how online gambling develops in a state, because there's protectionist interests about protecting a local brick and mortar economy that maybe has invested billions of dollars in the state and employing people in the state. And they have a pretty heavy hand in terms of shifting legislation or regulation, and to make sure that they get a seat at the table when those things are being decided. And that will directly influence what the consumer sees when it comes to an online product.
I would add on to that it's also different sports in each state. A state like Colorado is going to have more hockey fans and bettors than, a state like Tennessee, for example. SEC football is going to be bigger in the South than it is in the North. These are some of the big differences you see, and from a European perspective, they're not used to it. On the regulation side, every state is different. They're all going to do it a little bit differently than the other state. God forbid they all actually agree on one form of regulation, but that will never happen. I think advertisers, affiliates, operators, regulators, everybody is on different pages, and it will be like that.
I think it makes more of a challenge for the smaller affiliates.
Okay.
Because they're having, they're often much, they have a very limited resource pool. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is piled into SEO, getting the rankings and getting the traffic that they need. Now they suddenly have to deal with a lot of legislation, which as soon as you've learned it, you've got to start all over again the next time you come around. Plus, they might have a brand that they have to filter their users. Right. So they might, for example, have a review of an operator but then they have to filter for where the traffic is coming from. Yeah. It's not as simple as just build a site and all your users can view that content and interact with it. You might get users from an unregulated state coming in. You have to filter that out. You have to make it clear to them that they can't actually access these sites, that they can read the information, but they can't access the site. So it technologically, it gets more complicated from that perspective. And then again, if you have users coming from a state that already has, or is very well known for its land-based casino,
right,
they're much more familiar with the game. Where then you have issues is they're used to playing certain games in their land-based casinos. Can they find those online? Can they have the same experience? Why can't I play my game online that I can go down the road and play? And that can cause, it can cause problems for affiliates who have traffic and they can't match the user need.
Well, and if you think about, I mean, this sort of speaks to both Ben and Justin's point. Like, think about something like New Jersey. New Jersey has a prohibition on betting on New Jersey college teams. So if you have a player who's used to playing with an illegal offshore book, they could have been doing that, betting on New Jersey teams from within New Jersey. If they were to convert over to a legal site, they can no longer bet on their New Jersey teams. They might be confused, not knowing the legality, the regulation, everything else. They could easily be confused. It's like, why can't I bet on the games I want to bet on? Because, and a lot of states have these collegiate prohibitions, which limit product offering within a given state. It might be, you can't bet on games within the state of that with the college from that state. I've seen that rolled out a couple different times. And there's legislation pending in my home state that has that same type of language in it that's protectionist against collegiate athletes and that sort of thing. So I think that is a little bit confusing for a consumer, and and also it's just for operators, it makes it thorny because they have to chart all that as well. And then on the regulation side, with the striking down of PASPA, I mean, that was the federal law on this. So there's not going to be a law of the land in the US anytime soon that's going to set the record clear. You're going to have every state do it differently. And unfortunately, with marketing affiliates, because of the nature of their business, the fact that they're pushing traffic in exchange for money, they're always going to be under regulatory scrutiny. It's just the way, as a former regulator, I mean, one of the sort of fundamental tenets of regulation is follow the money. And the more money that's at stake, the more you go under the microscope. And so if it's somebody who stands to make more money by generating more traffic, they're going to be looked at closer by a regulator just to make sure that everything they're doing is above board. There's no concerns from a responsible gaming perspective. There's no concerns that there's any sort of criminality interest involved in any way, shape, or form. And so it's a complicated game. And so that is a large reason why I ended up where I am, because I saw licensing problems firsthand. And I've always thought there should be a tech solution to addressing licensing across multiple states, because it's confusing for even the big operators. It's confusing because it's not as if legislation or regulation are passed and it just stays static. It changes. Those things get reviewed and altered over time. The language has changed. They might add and change the form. They might update something, and there's new reporting requirements. And keeping track of all that without a full-time compliance staff is a challenge.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you say, because that's actually answered a little bit of my next question. I was going to ask, because these sorts of regulatory issues, they don't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon. It seems very unlikely there's going to be some sort of harmonization across the state. So, I mean, this challenge is always going to be there. So I was going to ask you, is there an efficient way to deal with this? Does this always have to be a challenge? And you kind of mentioned, the tech solution that kind of goes along with that. I mean, is that what you'd say? Technology is the answer to kind of dealing with these, kind of, issues and kind of drainage on resources, actually, Yeah,
I mean, I think technology, given that we're all operating in the technological sphere now. I mean, everybody who's doing online gaming we have developers and tech people that we work with day in and day out. So finding a tech solution to the licensing problem shouldn't be that difficult. And I mean, that's what my current company has built. And so that's why, I mean, I'm fully behind this. I used to think the same thing when I worked at an operator, that there really should be a technological solution to managing gaming licenses across 8, 10, 12, 20 different jurisdictions. Because the analogy I used to make is that every new state that opened was just a new brick you'd put in your backpack that you carried forever. Right. Because you had to maintain your licensing obligations in that state going forward. And some states, recent states, and I'll give credit to regulators. There are progressive regulators out there, and some states will say they'll offer like a limited reciprocity. So maybe if you're licensed in 2 or 3 other states, you have a shortened form, or they do something. And I've started to see that poke up a little bit.
Okay.
But I don't think that's ever going to fully take over the mainstream, because every state, although they might look to other states, they still have their own specific concerns to that state, and they're not going to full bore copy and paste somebody else and just accept exactly what that state did.
Understood.
I think you're going to continue to see people have problems. You know, technology will solve maybe some filing issues that people have, but at the end of the day, there are a number of states that are asking for fingerprints, and no technology in the world is going to replace you having to go stand with a police officer and have your fingerprints taken. If there is technology, if there is technology, we should all be investing in it right now. And with that is the good and the bad. Each state is different. Each state has their own little quirks, but the more states are going to request fingerprints, as Justin said, follow the money.
Yeah.
I have to explain to Europeans a lot of times that you know, American gambling goes back a very, very long time, and it was mafia at the beginning, and it's maybe not mafia today, but you know, it still holds a lot of the scrutiny from the 20s, 30s, and 40s and 50s.
Right.
And that's not going to change. No technology is going to change the history and makeup of American gambling. And yeah, the regulators are going to continue to make it hard for operators and marketers. And you know, with fingerprints, it kind of means that technology, no matter how good it is, can help you all the way.
Right. Understood. Okay. Just conscious of time, I want to take a step away from the regulatory side of things and look a bit more at the kind of core marketing issues. And I just wonder, because I'm sure we've all seen over the last year or so some of the big kind of media partnerships we've seen in the industry and in the headlines. A lot of big like home known brands kind of making partnerships. And I just wonder, you know, how important of a role do media partnerships play? Can you have success in America without partnering, or does your brand need to be connected to an already established US brand? Ben, could I get your thoughts on that first?
Unibet. Unibet. Just one word, Unibet. Unibet's
okay.
not an American brand.
Right.
They didn't go and partner with really anybody outside of Mohegan Sun in Pennsylvania. But if you see, it's very, very, very small. It says Mohegan Sun. And Unibet's a prime example of not needing the big time media name. There will be more and more of them. There were a funny story back in early 2000s. Somebody I know went to somebody else to get a casino, and he said to them, "Why would you want to open up another casino? There's already 20 of them." Yeah, that was, you know, and now there's 4,000 casinos in the UK. So in the US, while, yeah, a media partnership might help you, look at Barstool and Penn. It really helped Barstool out of the gate. But Barstool's numbers aren't amazing now. They haven't been able to keep up the momentum they had. So it doesn't matter how big the name is. If you're not good at digital, you're not good at, you know, promotions and CRM.
Yeah,
this is still very much what the business is, and you know, you can go pay ESPN the $3 billion that they want, but if you don't know what you're doing, then it's just a waste of $3 billion, even with an ESPN name.
Understood. Just before we move on, to add to that, or any kind of contrasting thoughts? What do you think? Brilliant.
I think if you're a European player coming in, and it's what I like to call a very obvious European name, right? So I'm not going to, push on any competitors here, but like, if your name is like, you know, USA Gamble, it's such an obvious notion to an American that like you clearly shifted your name to force it, right? You're not a comfortable brand. It's going to take the average American better, you know, is going to be a little more cautious going through you, especially that you're going to trust you with payments and providing social, right? You're a foreign user to them. Right. Mm-hmm. So for those heavy European ones, I do think it makes sense to align with the U.S. brand, but it only makes sense to do so if you're going all in, right? So sometimes that even entails changing the branding, changing the palettes of your coloring, the product, so it really connects with that brand, right? It's not just enough to do a deal with a major U.S. brand, and it's like, oh, hey, we're, you know, again, USA Gamble or what have you, and we just did a deal with this brand. Trust us. That's not going to be enough. you have to really full-fledged it in. And with us at 888 Holdings, we were aware of that. And that's why right now we're Sports Illustrated Sportsbook. It's a very authentic American brand. That's the way to do it. And we're really connecting with the brand as a 360 approach, right? That's how European operators coming in from a foreign market should approach it, not just do it just to kind of maybe even get that database and have some connectivity, because that's not going to be fleeting.
I can add an affiliate perspective.
Okay.
So as an affiliate, what do you want from your operators? You want them to be trusted, well-known brands, because people recognize them on your site as a result.
Yeah,
they're far more attractive when you're marketing them. So from that perspective, we're quite happy when they go ahead and spend billions of dollars on media partnerships, because it's quite useful for us. We're in the business of marketing brands. The stronger that brand is, the easier it is to market at the same time.
Yeah.
Does it need that? I'd say certainly from a lot of what we see and what we hear from our users, trust, how they deal with their customers is often can outweigh far more than fancy logos and fancy partnerships.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would add, similar to what Justin and Ben said here, that it really goes back to how good is the product. And if you you might be able to fast forward your brand recognition by partnering with an ESPN or somebody else, and that can kind of race you ahead. But if at the end of the day, you don't have a very good product, being tied to a big well-known name is only going to get you so far. And then it's pretty quickly that that users and will communicate that, and organically there will be its own sort of backlash, where even having a big name and spotlights that you spend a whole bunch of money on isn't going to carry you at the end of the day, because you got to sort of look long term here. You might get a short term blip where you spike up, but it's not going to carry you if your fundamentals are not strong.
Yeah,
I would look at MGM as a prime example of it working. Great product, great name.
Yeah,
Entain and MGM together now, second largest in the U.S., probably a year or two away from being number one.
Okay,
with their growth rate.
So it can work. Yeah, brilliant. And I think just looking at some of those kind of operators that are doing well, and what you mentioned as well, Justin, Tonna, about actually trust and just the kind of level of service that you give your customer is kind of, I think we'd all be in agreement that putting the customer first should be of utmost importance, and making sure that the customer experience is maximized. And one of the biggest differences, I'd say, between the US affiliate market and, for example, the European affiliate market is the fact of course, affiliates need to be licensed in order to operate. And I just wonder if the benefit of having a higher standard of service from having licensed affiliates is an equal payout compared to maybe lessening the consumer's choice of brand to kind of to play with and enjoy different platforms on the market from an affiliate point of view, of course. So I just wonder, do you have any thoughts on that at all?
You're putting me in I'll navigate that minefield.
Just go.
So regulation always brings with it challenges. It's probably one of the biggest challenges that operators have.
Yeah.
Regulation can make it very, very hard for them to make any money at all. And if you can't make money, what's the point of being somewhere? Everybody's a business at the end of the day. None of these companies are charitable organizations. They're there to make money. Mm-hmm. And if the regulatory environment doesn't make that viable, they're going to move and look for greener pastures. As an affiliate, we want our customers to have choice. We want our users to have choice. We want them to have a choice of good and trustworthy brands. So we welcome the regulation from the sense of trust and the sense of when we are putting forward those brands, when we're reviewing them, mm-hmm. and we're saying, yes, we've gone through these, we've tested them out, they do a good job. We're happy to put our name to put their brand on and tie it to our own brands.
Yes.
I think that's a really important part. Having fair advertising is essential. I mean, okay, yeah, we could all, get back to the 50s and 60s where it was the Wild West in the advertising world and you could do or say anything.
Yeah.
I think regulation brings with it a lot more professionalism to the industry, which this industry really needs as well. It's got a bad enough rap, as Ben was saying, from past events. We're fighting an uphill PR battle at the same time as we are, as we're going about our job. It's not easy to recruit people, for example, to come work in the gaming industry. Some people, it's just not for some people.
Yeah.
So in that sense, bringing that layer of professionalism, we're all in favor of reasonable regulation, because you can take it far too far.
Yeah. And I think I agree with that. I think that what you need to do sometimes, though, is engage with the regulators, because they don't know what they don't know. And some newer regulators who might not have a history of gambling do not understand the marketing affiliate market at all. They don't know the costs that you deal with. They don't know what makes you profitable, what doesn't. So they might say licensing fee of whatever, $25,000.
Yeah.
And it's without thinking about it, because they have other factors that are influencing their determination. So if you want to have a voice at the table to influence that, I mean, regulations are put out for comment, and they take in comment and they engage in a discussion, regulators. So I think part of it is engaging with them and saying, hey, look, this is an onerous tax rate, or this is going to be a very high licensing fee, and it's going to really keep out most folks in the market. And I understand you can achieve your goals with risk mitigation from a regulatory standpoint in a similar way without quite such a burdensome fee, and you'd still keep out the bad actors. It's very possible.
Yeah. So it will lessen the user's choice, but I don't think users are nitpicky about which affiliates they choose, right? I think what's going to end up happening is, just like in other categories, you're going to have the big three or big four really controlling the market. Right now, you kind of already have that, right? It's Pareto analysis on steroids, where the top 99% of revenue is going to be driven by the top 1% of affiliates. That's going to happen more and more, and you're already seeing it. You're seeing, Better Collective absorb the Action Network as an example. Katina is going to be absorbing more, so you're going to see more of those bigger ones buying out the smaller players. And the small player, your major goal is to figure out, do I get bought out or do I go on my own? What I would say is the smarter affiliates that are going to continue long-term are going to be ones that figure out a unique way to capture database that's outside of the SEO route that's been happening, and even the content hub that's been happening. Mm-hmm. So an example is the free-to-play side, right? Free-to-play has been expanding more and more. There's been more companies jumping into that place. If there's a smart free-to-play provider that acts as an affiliate, that's going to be a clever way, as an example, to now create a new stream for affiliates that's not going to be as impacted by the laws of legislation.
I will be the bad guy here, and I will just go all in, and I'll say regulation's good. It's very good. It keeps out the more problematic players and partners. It keeps, when you go to an operator, they understand that you've already been checked. When you go talk to a large media company, you're able to show them that you've been checked, and opens up doors a lot easier. But it also, on the flip side, keeps out some of the bad actors, the people who do things that maybe aren't very good, and bring the bad PR that Justin spoke about. Maybe not the bad PR on the open, but the PR at least through the operators of who are these people. Yeah. I think that in certain other jurisdictions they've looked at it. I think the Americans are right in doing it. I think you keep the market clean. People who have anything questionable about them or what they do or their past don't come into the market. Yeah. I also think that it will keep things like Five Dimes from advertising on the New York Times. So these are things that, a company like Five Dimes advertised on the New York Times last year, while somebody like me can't really do that because I don't have a New York license. These are the things that will help keep the industry clean and clean it up, and will also safeguard the clients at the end of the day. It will get rid of a lot of the black. It will get rid of a lot of the other things. And, affiliates who were in the black market are already leaving to try to clean themselves up. And in that sense, it's good. It's good to say, well, it's not coming from the marketing side that the bad actors are.
Perfect. Ben, thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. And thank you to, all of you guys for joining us today. It's been some really, really insightful answers today. It's such a shame. I'm sure we could probably talk for such a long time about all of these topics we've covered. But unfortunately, our time is limited. But I just like to say thank you so much for joining our panel. And to the viewers watching, thank you as well. And we look forward to seeing you again very, very soon on the IGF platform. Have a great day. See you guys soon.